Hi, folks. I've seen your greetings. Thank you so much for coming onto the channel, participating in these live streams. This has been so much fun. One question that I already received was, is it over for Federer? Well, we're just going to have to see. I don't think we can count Roger Federer out in any way. I want to talk about the Djokovic match, and in fact, that is the first thing on my list, and that I'll try to develop a nugget around this Djokovic match. I guess the theme would be Djokovic rising. I think he looked fantastic last night in the match against the slayer of Federer, John Millman, who put up a fairly good fight, particularly in the second and third sets, but I think he was just a little too pooped, a little too exhausted. Still, very impressive from Millman. Unclear whether we'll see any more from John Millman, folks. That's going to be a big question. Going forward, remember, Marco Cecchinato was kind of blowing minds at the French Open, and now he has not been posting such great results. Well, the final score of this, it was 6-3, 6-4, 6-4. Djokovic emerges triumphant into the semifinal to face who I'm calling the snake in the grass, Kei Nishikori, who was able to outdo the mighty Marin Cilic, the big serving Croat, in 5 sets. And I want to talk about that match as well. Listen, the question of whether Djokovic is now the favorite. The question is whether Nadal can still be predicted to be the winner. Well, we've got some evidence. We're going to have a little more evidence in the Nadal versus Delpo match, which I'm going to do a bit of a preview today of. I can't go on for as long as usual today. I have to go pick up my daughter and do a couple of errands. It's possible I'll go on later tonight, but more like tomorrow after the match is likely late at night. Subscribe to the channel so you can get the live, uncut Tennis Talk daily streams. I'm going to be giving you the nuggets, the essential nuggets of information and analysis about these matches. And they are fantastic matchups, folks, and I think I'm going to demonstrate that in this talk. Let's start a discussion. Drop a comment. I will try to respond to those questions. But for now, Djokovic rising. Listen, people in the know, the people who have played Grand Slams, I've played a lot of tennis in my life, but I've never played in a Grand Slam tournament, let alone delivered an impressive result in a Grand Slam tournament. But folks like Richard Krajicek, folks like John McEnroe, and really the list goes on and on, Andre Agassi, the people in the know, they believe Novak Djokovic, when he's on, is the most complete player on the tennis circuit today. And I think last night in the match against the Australian, John Millman, something of an upstart, kind of came out of the woodwork to, as I stated, slay the great Federer. I guess that was an interesting match, although, again, Federer played in something of a bizarre way, apparently brought on by the unusually hot and humid conditions. Well, we saw a little bit of unusual conduct from Djokovic last night as well, though not as extreme. Interestingly, quite a few drop shots coming from the racket of Novak Djokovic, and this was consistent with Federer's strategy, which was to end the points as early as possible. But again, Djokovic at least adjusted his approach. The drop shots weren't working too well. He did succeed in a few of them, but generally, they weren't working too well. And in contrast to Federer, Novak did adjust his game. And this match became really a bit more competitive as the match progressed, on the one hand. On the other hand, Millman did seem to become, I think, increasingly exhausted after that marathon match with Federer. Well, I think that the folks in the know need to be heated. I think if you look at the Djokovic game as instantiated in the first set of the match against Millman, in which we can safely say that Djokovic was in the zone, the real zone. Well, by not only a psychological state, but there's also a zone at the baseline where it's 20 feet 27 feet across the baseline in the singles court. And Djokovic, I think, uses about 12 or 13 feet of it in the middle to very impressively drive the other player, the opponent, from side to side to side, while Djokovic remains relatively stationary. And this was what he was doing to Millman last night. Djokovic was, again, amazingly sort of stationary and just solid in this zone, this physical zone, this 17, say 15 feet of the baseline, moving very tightly back and forth in there, but not very noticeably. Meanwhile, driving shots, opening up the court. This is what he was doing last night so well, particularly in the first set. Djokovic lately has been coming out shooting. He's been coming out on fire, and if anything, tends to get a little tired, and his game tends to become complicated by the circumstances as the match goes on. But in the beginning, he has such laser clear vision that I think he was able to execute this very effective game, particularly in this first set, in that zone, in that kind of zone of trust. But then driving Millman side to side, opening up the court at every available opportunity. But at the same time, again, the hyena stays in his zone. He's not moving much at all. So that was very conspicuous and very devastating from Djokovic. Well, he was 74% win percentage on his second serve, which was very, very impressive in the first set. He was 68% wins on his first serve. His conversion rate in this match, again, I'm just talking about the first set because I want to kind of identify this first set. It was very interesting. It was quite a display. For those of you who have the opportunity, go back and watch that first set, because I think this was sort of a different Djokovic in a way. Djokovic has a couple of different personas, a couple of different stylistic personas, and one of them was without question on display in the first set, and in a way, he kind of disappeared. That Djokovic sort of disappeared for the rest of the match, in large part because Millman adjusted and didn't let Djokovic work in that zone of trust that he can work so well in, and that he did demonstrably work so well in the first set. Well, the only issue with Djokovic was the conversion rate, but, I talked about Wimbledon and the key to Djokovic's Wimbledon victory, and it was really the number of break points that Djokovic, the greatest returner of all time, is able to create. It's the number and not the conversion. He creates so many that he actually doesn't need a great conversion rate in order to win matches. Well, he was 1 of 6 on break points against the Millman serve in the first set. He broke in the second game, and that was enough to give him the win 6-3 in the first. Well, in the second set, Djokovic continued to be impeccable on serve. And in fact, his serve, I think, was improved to some extent, particularly on the first serve numbers. As I recall, there was 0 break points created by Millman on the Djokovic serve. Meanwhile, Djokovic was winning 15 of the 39 receiving points again in the second set. Millman did pick it up. He did break, in fact. He was 1 of 8 on break points throughout the match. And Djokovic was 2 of 6 on break points throughout the match. So again, I guess Djokovic had a better conversion rate. Of course, Millman just could not create the break points on the Djokovic serve. And as the match progressed, it became very clear that Millman was having to deal with a lot more pressure on serve, though he was squeezing out of his service games most of the time. Well, Djokovic was 5 for 5 at the net in the third set, and it was hard, however, for Djokovic to kind of push out of this match. The conditions were a bit harsh. There was the moment, it was at the end of the first set, when Millman decided that he wanted to change his outfit and take about 10 minutes off. Well, even though he did take the first set, was kind of moaning and complaining, bending down, kind of, I don't know whether he was feigning it or not, whether he was kind of faking this or not. It's unclear with these players, nothing specific, but again, sweating, kind of acting out the part of someone really exhausted. And so when Millman said to Djokovic, do you mind if I go change? Djokovic was kind of laughing. Well, sure. I'd love to sit down here with my ice towels and take a nice big rest before I come out and wipe you off the court in the second set. Well, that's not quite what Djokovic did in this match. Listen, Djokovic did what he needed to do in this match, and not too much more. The conditions, I think, produced that result and produced that approach. He couldn't do that much more than just what it took to win, because it would have been too exhausting. He's playing for a title here, folks. This was just one little hurdle to get over. He's playing for titles, and he was trying some of those drop shots, which suggests the same approach that Federer was taking to Millman, which didn't work for Federer, didn't really work for Djokovic, but the underlying point is the same. Both of those individuals, Djokovic and Federer, wanted to end points early because they just didn't want to exhaust themselves. And I don't think they wanted to get into real extended rallies with this guy, Millman, this sort of unknown. Well, Federer knew Millman fairly well. They had practiced together and whatnot. But Djokovic, I'm not sure whether he knows Millman. I don't think so. But in any case, I don't think Djokovic was in any mood to take the malarkey of extended baseline rallies. And unfortunately for Djokovic, he had to engage in a lot of rallies. There were a lot of slugfests. But Djokovic, particularly in the first set, was just so consistent. He did end up having more unforced errors, but, you know, that in the context of the match, it makes sense. He wanted to end points early. He was playing aggressively. He was playing a little bit different from the way he would play under ordinary conditions, say on an 80-degree day when there's not so much humidity. But he did change his game a little bit. The first set is really his trophy piece in this match. The first set was just impeccable. I mean, I suppose it doesn't quite beat Dominic Thiem's first set over Rafael Nadal, in which he took the excitable bull to the bagel shop, and that was a sight to behold without question. But Djokovic had a very good set. Again, he did what he needed to do. Each set win was predicated on one single break. There was nothing scorched earth about this match, and part of that has to do with John Millman, who prevented the scorched earth approach from, a part of it also has to do with Djokovic and basically deciding that it's not worth it for him to just flatten out this guy. It's not worth it for him to run too much. Well, again, Djokovic actually ended up, in terms of the match as a whole, he ended up running around the court just a little bit more than Millman, so that gives you a sense. The first set, it was very clear that Millman was running around a lot more than Djokovic. Djokovic was staying in that zone of trust, and really that's the nugget about Djokovic today. That zone that he has, it's about 15 feet on the baseline, right there in the center, where he can move in very tight ways, but he can dictate play from that fairly small space and make the other player move around. He was doing this to Federer a bit in Cincinnati, and I had a comment about Federer moving too much from side to side in that Djokovic match as opposed to more forward. Well, Djokovic makes you move side to side. That's part of the method to his sort of mastery and madness, if you will. It's the method to his success, certainly. But he's always prepared to attack, too. He's always prepared to come in, and he was very good at the net. I think I cited the 100% win percentage at the net from the final set, which suggests something. Again, it suggests that he was ending some points quickly, but also effectively doing so. He had gas in the tank. But he's always ready to attack, and again, the first set is a perfect example of this in the Djokovic versus Millman. He's always, so the rallies weren't going too long. When Djokovic is working in that zone, which is both a psychological state and a physical state down there at the baseline, that zone of tight movement where Djokovic actually doesn't have to run a lot, but he dictates play in a very comprehensive way from that fairly small zone and makes the other player run side to side continually. And Djokovic, at every available opportunity, it was just blowing my hair back last night. He opens up court for himself at and that's part of the side-to-side movement. He's constantly opening up court for himself so that he can smack something into the open court and then at the turn of a dime, sprint up to the net. Millman looks up, totally surprised to see the hyena waiting for him right there at the net, and Djokovic was putting away balls fairly well at the net. So this was pretty much a tour de force. Djokovic didn't give it his full 110%. Absolutely, because he's playing for the title, folks. He's not playing for bagels against John Millman. No, he's not playing to crush John Millman. John Millman's just a pretty minor hurdle on the way to more important matches. We'll talk about the Nishikori match. So, as I said, Djokovic was attempting a lot of drop shots, which was funny because Federer had really failed and it kind of backfired on him in the match against Millman, but Djokovic tried it nevertheless. We talked about the change of clothes for Millman, and apparently that might have helped Djokovic as well. But whether, Millman went and changed his clothes or not and gave Djokovic a rest, I think Djokovic was going to win this match. And he was going to do it in a sort of clinical way rather than in a very devastating, scorched earth way, because he's playing for the title. He's playing for the title, folks. And according to the people in the know, drop a comment about this. I'm very interested. We're hearing some thunder now. We're getting some thunderstorms in Boston. Let me know, is Djokovic the one this year? Is he going to lift this trophy? It is becoming a closer and closer question. It's becoming a distinct likelihood that he could, in fact, pull this. He could, in fact, slay the legend yet again. Djokovic was built. His business model is slaying legends. He is a mind-blowing figure in tennis. He's controversial in a way. As a commenter was saying the other day, he's not very popular. And my response in terms of why he's not popular is precisely because the popularity of Federer and Nadal and the fact that Djokovic is the slayer. He leads in their head-to-heads, and he is the slayer of Fedal. He has flattened Nadal on enough occasions to call him the legend slayer in that respect, and the people that love Federer and Nadal, which number in the millions, multi-millions. Rafael Nadal is the most popular tennis player on Twitter with 3 million more followers than Roger Federer. But Djokovic is the slayer. He doesn't have the followers. He might not be popular, but according to the people in the know, the people who have played Grand Slams, whether they hit with two-handers or one-handers, John McEnroe, Richard Krajicek, Andre Agassi, a number of others, believe that Djokovic is the most complete player on the tennis circuit. And if you watch the first set from last night, you begin to see what these folks mean. You begin to see that what they're saying does make sense. Let's see what the hyena can do next. He's going to have Nishikori. Let's talk about Nishikori. I'm calling Nishikori the snake in the grass at the 2018 U.S. Open. He's been slithering his way through this tournament. Well, he was able to overcome the mighty Marin Cilic and reach the U.S. Open semifinal for the first time in a number of years. I believe it was back in 2014, I think. But in any case, snake in the grass is the best term for Nishikori, and he is slithered into the semifinal. The key in terms of why he beat Cilic came down to the fifth set. He was able to turn it on a bit in the fifth set. At the same time, Cilic's game did drop a little bit. But listen to this number. Nishikori was winning 55% of Marin Cilic's first serves in the final set. First serve returns. He was winning more than half of the points on the Cilic first serve. And he was winning, at the same time, 82% of his own first serves. Nishikori was generally a lot more consistent throughout this match. Cilic did hit more winners, but in the final set, the winners started to become more scarce, and the unforced errors at the same time started to increase very substantially. So Nishikori kind of got a break, but again, 55% in response to the Cilic first serve, folks. That's the number that Nishikori has been posting in this tournament that is so impressive. In the aggregate numbers, Kei Nishikori leads everybody in this tournament, is in first place on the number of points won in response to first serves. And there's no better example of that than in the fifth set against the very big serving and former U.S. Open champion, Marin Cilic. Well, this was quite a match. To give you some context too, Millman is the one that is winning of everybody in the tournament. He still holds this number. Now, this will change because he's out of the tournament probably. But at the point right now, prior to the semifinals, John Millman is still in the top place, in first place in terms of the points won in response to second serves. So that's an indicator as well. Nishikori also leads in the aggregate tournament numbers on break points won. So listen, Nishikori is a returner. He's going to be able to get a piece of the Djokovic serve. Djokovic is leading in the second serve points won, to be honest. He's up there in on his own second serve. But his conversion rate is fairly low, but Nishikori's was doing a little better. Listen, the key to this match in terms of Djokovic versus Nishikori has got to be Nishikori getting a piece of the Djokovic second serve. But also, in light of what happened with Cilic, one key must be, and of course, Nishikori's got to serve well himself. He had a great first serve percentage. But you could make the argument that Nishikori is shining most in response to the first serves, where he blocks often, but the block floats very deep into the court, often just kissing the baseline and often landing at the feet of the returner. He is vicious on the first serve return. So let's see what Nishikori can do in that respect. Listen, Djokovic leads in the head-to-head with Nishikori without question, very solidly. But I think that would be one or both of the keys. I mean, it really has to do with breaking Djokovic more than Djokovic breaks Nishikori. Aaron Terry says Nishikori will give Djokovic a hard time. I think he can. Again, he is the snake in the grass, the concealed danger at this tournament. He very well could find himself in another U.S. Open semifinal. Final. Now, listen. If I'm going to do a scientific prediction, it's going to be Djokovic in 4, probably. I think Djokovic might very well need to drop a set in order to work up that sort of venom that he'll need and that fight that he'll need in order to set the snake in the grass aside, to stop the slithering of this snake, because Nishikori is a real threat. Again, that first serve return is his major weapon, and he can do serious damage to Djokovic on that. Now, Djokovic, in a way, complements that because he's got such a strong second serve win percentage. So Nishikori can, do some damage to the Djokovic first serve, but his second, again, Djokovic is leading in the second serve win percentage in the tournament aggregate numbers in terms of among the players that are left in the tournament. So it's going to be a fantastic match between Djokovic and Nishikori, folks. It will be a wonderful match. And I'm going to, of course, be doing a number of videos on it. Well, we'll be doing a couple of live videos probably. We'll probably do a couple on maybe Saturday morning. We'll have to see. We'll have to schedule it. Sometimes I like to kind of have these matches completed so we can actually talk about it. Another option is to maybe go on live during the last few moments of the match, say the last set, if it's going 5 or it's clear it's going to be over, I could go on live. But for those of you joining us, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. I invite you to click the notification bell so you can get notified of the Tennis Talk Daily live streams, which are live and uncut in real time. We're picking this tournament apart from every possible angle, and we are zeroing in on the cream of the crop at the U.S. Open. It's Novak Djokovic versus Kei Nishikori in one semifinal, and it's Rafael Nadal versus Juan Martín del Potro in the other semifinal. So to put a finer point on the Djokovic versus Nishikori head-to-head, it's 14-2. Nishikori beat Djokovic in the 2014 semifinal at the U.S. Open, 6-4, 1-6, 7-6, 6-3. In that match, there was a key inroads that he found into the Djokovic second serve. So that kind of confirms my thesis here that if Nishikori wants to escape this alive, if he wants to slay the elastic hyena, he is going to have to get all up into the Djokovic second serve and use those skills that makes Nishikori so good on the first serve return and just, I think, invest it even a bit more on the Djokovic second. Well, if Djokovic is landing all his firsts, well, Nishikori will have something to rely on because he's so good on the first serve returns. He's the tournament leader for those of you just tuning in. So again, in that match, he was 63% winning percentage on the Djokovic second. That's impressive. Will Novak let Kei Nishikori get 63% of his second serve return points as Kei did in 2014? Well, based on the Djokovic form, folks, I think it's very unlikely. The scientific prediction must be, the rational prediction must be that Djokovic pushes through and sets aside the snake in the grass and moves into this final poised to lift this trophy once again, poised, in fact, perhaps to begin lifting consecutive Grand Slam trophies once again, because if Djokovic lifts this trophy, doesn't he become the favorite in Melbourne? Doesn't he become the favorite at the Australian? And if he wins in Australia, and if he wins, say, in Indian Wells or takes the Sunshine Double, doesn't he become, and then starts to perform on clay, doesn't he become the favorite at the French Open? Well, circumstances will determine whether that happens. I think if Rafa Nadal is in really good form and good physical shape, then it's going to be hard for Djokovic, who has beaten Nadal a number of times on the red dirt. I think it's 7 times. The most times that anybody has ever beaten Nadal. But if Djokovic is just kind of getting revved up, if he's bringing the Djokovic zone to these matches, if he's bringing that second wind, that fight that he can generate from total adversity, that new Djokovic that comes out when his opponent takes him to the cliff and makes the Serbinator look down. Then Djokovic comes out in a kind of different form, doesn't he? He's a different player at that point. He can grab those second wins. And heck, Millman didn't even make Djokovic go there the other night. And Djokovic was very sort of clinical about that. Again, every set based on a single break. He wasn't in the business of scorching the earth. Last night, of course, the temperature was already too scorching, so there was too much scorching going on, and so Djokovic just played it cool. Again, he's shooting for this title. He's not shooting for bagels or breadsticks or some kind of, exceeding superiority in a match against Millman. No, that's not what he wants to do. But listen, Djokovic has to be the favorite based on the head-to-head going in against Nishikori. But if the circumstances permit, and if Djokovic permits Nishikori to start carving into that Djokovic second serve, well, then Djokovic could have some problems, particularly if Nishikori is serving well, which he will be and has been all week. He's been serving pretty well. He's not leading in the serving numbers, but on the return is where the snake in the grass could do some real damage to Djokovic, folks. Well, that's going to be a fantastic match without question. Let's talk a little bit about Nadal versus Del Potro. Nadal leads in that head-to-head 11-5. They've met 5 times at Grand Slams, and Del Potro has won only one of those matches at the Grand Slams in the best-of-5 context. It was in 2009, the year he won the U.S. Open, in straight sets. Some of the keys to this match included Del Potro's 100% win percentage on break points. So he saved 100% of the break points that Nadal was able to create. He was 70% on his second serve. He needs to keep, obviously, his first serve very strong. But again, I think the key for Delpo is just to very much solidify his own serve, concentrate on the first serves, take Nadal to the breakers if you have to. But then, of course, on this, I stated that he was 70% on his second serve. What I meant to say is he was 70% on his second serve return. Well, that's a very impressive and exceptional number. I can't remember. Maybe Dominique Thiem did the other night in that one strange set, which was kind of an anomaly. But I can't remember the last time I saw an opponent of Nadal's that was winning 70% of Nadal's second serve return points. Because, listen, the second serve win percentage is a metric of the ground game. Mostly, or it can be, it's one metric. Of course, the best returners hit winners off the second serve, and it can be very short, but generally the second serve will produce more rallies, and the win percentage on the second serve return is a measure not only of the return prowess of the returner, but also just of the basic quality of the ground game. So Delpo, again, will need, it's the same old story, folks. Delpo's going to need to very much carve in to the Nadal second serve as he did in 2009. He's going to have to deliver the clutch tennis on the break points because, again, he saved 100% of the break points that Nadal created against this, his serve on the occasion in 2009. Again, he needs to very much keep his own serving intact and applying pressure to Nadal. Nadal looks good. He delivered against Thiem. There are differing opinions about why he won and how good Thiem was in that match. My personal view is that to the extent Nadal struggled, it was because Dominique Thiem was applying a lot of pressure in that match, and Dominique Thiem was playing a great match of tennis. That, without question, was the greatest match at this U.S. Open this year, for sure. Now, whether it continues to hold that distinction through the weekend, we'll have to see. I'm hoping very much that we get some even better matches, some even better 5-set matches. So those are the semifinals. They're going to be epic, folks. Another thing that I wanted to mention real quick was the shot clock issue. It seems to be working very well. The players seem to be adapting, and there doesn't appear to be any real big problem with it. Listen, there was moaning and groaning by Nadal and even Djokovic when they were talking about the potential shot clock at Wimbledon. Of course, in the background of that was the looming U.S. Open, where they had already determined at that point, we were talking about this earlier in the summer, they'd already determined that there would be a shot clock. Well, I did a video, and I said there should be a shot clock, and we talked about Nadal's comments. He stated something to the effect of, tradition supports the continuation of not such strict guidelines on the time, but also he talked about long matches, creating the drama, etc. Well, I don't think the drama has been decreased at all. I think the drama has been at a very high pitch. I think there's been plenty of time for servers to prepare, and I think there's been the biggest delayer of all, the biggest time violator of all, Rafael Nadal, is doing fine. He's not cramped by this, it doesn't seem. He's moving through his points, and you know what? It might be helping folks. There's just no complaints about this. So I'm not patting myself on the back, but I'm saying that my position all along has been that this is a good idea, and that moreover, it's just not that much of a constraint on the players. 25 seconds is absolutely sufficient to do this. Nadal, again, who is one of the big violators on time, has been able to do very well within the time constraints. So that's not a big deal at all, and I'm hoping, in fact, that the other Grand Slams come around on this issue. Of course, Wimbledon is considering it, but it'd be nice to see the other Grand Slams do it, to be quite honest. I mean, consider this, too. Nadal was talking about the epic 5-set matches. Some of the greatest matches ever have been so long, he was saying, and that's partly because the players get more time in between points. There's a lot of drama. Well, the team match was almost 5 hours long. So again, a real epic between Thiem and Nadal, a fantastic match. Once again, the best match so far at the U.S. Open this year. Well, those are the matches. Those are my comments. I hope everyone is doing wonderfully. For you Fed heads, I hope you're kind of sticking with this U.S. Open. It is hard, I realize. I'm a lover of Roger Federer myself, folks, and I've needed to kind of do a little soul searching, to be honest, to kind of revivify my perspective on tennis. And I love this game. I love the great players. I love the best players on the courts. I love the fighters. Whoever wins, I want to celebrate their wins. And we don't have to get down and despondent about Roger Federer. He's going to probably be back. The question has been raised as to whether it's likely he will win another Grand Slam. My position is that if he wins another Grand Slam, it will be one. One and one alone. But there's a certain symmetry in 20. Maybe the gods are sort of speaking to us or speaking to Federer and saying, probably best to just leave, to let the symmetry lie and see what happens. Let the chips fall where they will fall. And Rafael Nadal will very likely catch. Listen, the GOAT question is going to be impacted by the outcome of the U.S. Open. If Nadal can win this U.S. Open, again, the arguments are going to mount. The man is a tremendous tennis player, folks. There's no question about it. Right now, I'm still picking him as the favorite. So, in a way, my prediction is that Nadal is going to increase the support he has for the argument that he is going to be the greatest of all time at one point in terms of the results, in terms of the numbers. I think it's possible and probable that he's going to hold more Grand Slams. But the big issue will be whether they're distributed in a way throughout the slams. He's only got one Australian, and most of them, of course, have been on the clay. And so if he ends up winning a bunch, 4 more Grand Slams, and they're all at Roland Garros, I think that creates a bit of a problem. But listen, Roger's status as the greatest of all time is based in part on his superior numbers. And a lot of those numbers are never going to get broken, I don't think. But listen, Djokovic and Nadal have their eyes on them. But much of it has to do with what he's done for the game, his stylistic attributes, and just the love that the world has for Roger Federer and the joy that he has brought the world to an extent really that no other tennis player has ever been able to do. That's why, or that's part of why he's so great. It's because of how many people believe he's great, how much of an inspiration he's been for so many people. That's why he's great. It's not only the records, it's not only the fact that he came back and did win a few Grand Slams, but it's the idea that he needs to win more Grand Slams in order to maintain his status as the greatest of all time is not very credible. I don't think he does. I think 20 is just fine. I think it's a great career that he's had. He's going to win more titles, even if he has to play a few 250s and 500s, which he does already, a couple of them. But he's going to win more titles. I think he wants to go for triple digits on the titles, if not going to break the Connors record. And that could happen. Of course, he will then, if he does play more 250s, if he does play more 500s, and that's the form that the titles are coming in as, well, that could expose Federer to some counter-arguments in terms of the GOAT status. Well, we could go on and on and on about that, and listen, we will. Roger lives on in our talk, folks, so if you're a Fed fan, stick with the U.S. Open. Roger is always a point of reference for us, and we will always be talking about him and letting him live on in our talk, in our consideration of him, in our, again, our gratefulness for the gratitude we have that he exists. And so that's what we can do. We'll be watching him. He produced some great tennis at the U.S. Open this year. He was partying like it was 1969 in the match against Millman, and that did not work too well. But when you boil down the problem, there was a heat issue, there was a ventilation issue, and Roger was struggling, probably because he's 37 to some degree, but he also pulled out some fantastic tennis. He was inflexible that night. He was basically, in a way, throwing the match, folks, because he decided, given the heat, given the circumstances, that the only way he wanted to win this match was quickly, by ending points quickly and by getting through it quickly. Well, he misjudged that, and he was, with the approach that he brought on that night, he was unable to achieve the result that he wanted. Djokovic, on the other hand, was able to achieve the result that he wanted without, in fact, expending that much energy. But part of that involved adapting. Djokovic adapted. He tried the same drop shots that Federer was trying, and after a while, Djokovic modified his game and started trying some new things over the course of the match. So he adapted. He fine-tuned his game to contend with the particular opponent on the other side of the court. That was the difference. He got through in straight sets. It was efficient. He didn't do any more than he needed to do. So it wasn't as hot. The conditions weren't quite as bad for Djokovic and Millman, no question, but they were still pretty bad. So whatever the reason for Federer's loss, we can't go on about it. We're not going to dwell too much on it, to be honest. It was a bit of a bizarre showing, but these hot conditions, folks, have been producing bizarre outcomes on a number of different levels, to be honest. I think the number of bagels that have been produced in this tournament is pretty high, relatively speaking. I think there's been some strange things occurring. Sloane Stephens struck out the other day. The heat was just way too much for her. I mean, it was a few of these players were dropping like flies in these conditions. So the gladiators who have forged on, who have stormed through this tournament, still standing and now on the horizon. I believe there's some cooler weather. It's going to be just fine. It's not going to be excruciating for the semis and the final, as far as I know, although we can talk about that. The weather does change. I'm not a trained meteorologist, and my app is often wrong, but it does appear that the heat's going to let up to a large degree. I want to remind everybody here that you are invited to subscribe to Tennis Talk Daily. Remember, when you do, to hit the notification button so you can get a notification of all the live and uncut Tennis Talk Daily streams that are coming in. We're doing it daily over the course of the U.S. Open. I'm impressed with the record we've created. Go back and look at the videos. We've got consecutive days. We're creating a record of this. We can go back and re-experience a lot of this, to be honest. So remember, when you watch the videos back, for those of you returning, watching this video as a recording and not live, remember that you can turn on the comments, so as you watch the video and listen to what I'm saying, you can also pay attention to the fantastic comments that we're getting in response in the margin. And it's quite an entertaining experience, because these people, again, that are commenting, many of them are very high tennis IQ people. And thank you, all of you, for making my tennis IQ a little bit higher. And I learned so much from you guys. Listen, I'm going to have to sign off for now. It's been a pleasure doing this live stream, as it's been a pleasure doing all the live streams. Best wishes to everyone. Signing off from Boston. Bye.